Hello, my name is Arushi and I will lead the lecture on the integumentary system. So what is the integumentary system? In short, it's your skin, but it's also your sweat, oil, hair, and fingernails. The main function of the system is protection. Without your skin, you would not survive due to infection and many other factors. The parts that aid in protection are proteins, which are made of keratin, which are for the strength of your skin. Lipids, which secrete around cells in order to not allow unwanted materials into the body. Glandular secretions are oil and sweat glands, and melanin pigments protect you from UV radiation. This system is also a major blood reservoir, as around 10% of your body's blood is constantly flowing through the integumentary system. It also aids in thermoregulation through your sweat. Vasoconstriction is when your blood vessels get smaller in diameter in order to conserve blood and heat, and this happens when you're hot. Vasodilation is the opposite, when your blood vessels widen to allow for more blood flow, increasing the heat lost in the skin, such as when you're exercising. The synthesis of vitamin D also begins in the integumentary system. The skin has layers. The top layer is the epidermis, the middle and most abundant in features is the dermis, and the bottommost layer is a subcutaneous tissue, which can also be referred to as the hypodermis, fat layer, or superficial fascia. I will refer to it as hypodermis. In this diagram, you can see the clear difference between the layers labeled on the right. Let's talk about the most superficial layer, the epidermis. But before we talk about this layer, let's talk about its cells. The cells in this layer are keratinized, stratified squamous epithelial cells. That's a mouthful. So what that means is that they have keratin, which are more than one layer. They have keratin, they are more than one layer, they're flat and made of epithelial tissue. This just describes the cells. Keratinocytes produce keratin and lamellar granules. This cell is what most of the epidermis is made of, about 90% of it. Keratin is a super important protein that protects your body from abrasion. It also acts as a semi-permeable membrane, allowing for only certain materials to enter and exit the cell. Melanocytes mainly produce melanin, which is where you get your pigment from. We'll go over melanin and melanocytes later in this lecture. Langerhans cells are macrophages, meaning they have the ability to engulf any unwanted material into themselves. This plays a huge role in immune responses. Merkel cells are touch and sensory receptors, which are super important when it comes to skin, as you might imagine. So in this diagram on the right, you can clearly see all of these cells. Within the epidermis, you have 5 layers in thick skin, which is skin on the bottom of your feet or palms of your hands, and 4 layers when it comes to other skin. From superficial to deep, these layers contain dead to stem cells. Stem cells are just cells that create new cells. At the top, we have stratum corneum, which is composed of 5 to 50 layers of flattened, completely dead keratinocytes. Stratum lucidum is next. It's only present in thick skin and is only 3 to 5 cell layers of dead keratinocytes. Next, in all skin, is the stratum granulosum, which serves as a transition layer between dead and alive cells. Stratum spinosum has the most numerous layers of all the cells. The deepest layer is the stratum basale, which is a single layer of stem cells, which with some scattered Langerhans and Merkel cells. But its main function is to create new cells, which are then slowly brought up as they go through their life cycle, which is how you end up with dead cells on the top. You should pause the video here to memorize all of the layers in the epidermis. Moving on from the epidermis, the dermis is the most complicated layer because it contains so much. The dermis carries neurovasculature, meaning arteries, veins, and nerves. So around 10% of your blood is constantly flowing through the dermis. This layer is mostly made of fibroblasts, which are cells that create collagen and elastic fibers to give your skin its strength. It also contains macrophages and adipocytes, which are fat cells. Other than these cells, this layer is where the hair follicles and roots, as well as glands, are found. Pause here to look at the diagram more closely. The final layer of the integumentary system is the hypodermis. The hypodermis is literally just a layer of fat. It aids in thermoregulation and energy storage because that's what fat does. It also has some vasculature, but it mostly just leads up into the dermis. I said we have glands in the dermis, but glands deserve a little more elaboration. You have 2 main types of glands, endocrine, which secrete into the bloodstream, and exocrine, which secrete out to the surface. The integumentary glands are exocrine. We have 2 types of integumentary glands, sebaceous and sudoriferous. Sebaceous glands are oil glands. They secrete, which just means release, oil known as sebum. These glands are closely associated with hair follicles and acne. The other type of gland we discuss is a sudoriferous gland. These secrete sweat. There are two types of sweat glands, eccrine, which are the most numerous and aid in thermoregulation, and apocrine, which are the sweat glands you think about when you think of sweat. They're less common and in places such as the armpits, beards, genitalia, and get triggered by excitement, embarrassment, or emotions such as those. These are the sweat glands that have an odor. Eccrine sweat actually does not. Getting back to melanin and melanocytes, we can see in the diagram that they have long processes, like the very long, they're processes, the very long processes that come out, as you can see here. And these processes aid in protecting the nuclei and DNA of the keratinocytes in layers above them. It works because the processes wrap around the keratinocytes, so they have an extra layer of protection. The actual melanin pigment is synthesized from the amino acid tyrosine and in the presence of the enzyme tyrosinase. Tyrosinase? I'm not sure how to pronounce that. Without this enzyme, you get what is called albinism, which is essentially a lack of melanin. This leaves you with no pigment in the eyes, hair, or skin. Some key functions are that it absorbs UV radiation and protects the DNA in cells. Freckles are accumulations of melanin, and moles are essentially mini benign tumors of melanin, so they don't really have an effect on you. This is a very interesting concept of the integumentary system, particularly the dermis layer. Lines of cleavage, also known as Langer's lines, are a map of collagen fibers showing the skin tension. This is what you see on this is your fingerprint, essentially. Plastic surgeons should have this map memorized because this is what you want your skin to look like and function after they stitch you up. You want to look back to normal. As promised in the introduction of this class, I'll be going over 3 types of skin cancer. Basal cell carcinoma is the least serious of skin cancers, and it starts with the cells in the stratum basale. It is the most common but very easy to recover from. Squamous cell carcinoma has an intermediate mortality rate, and it starts with cells in the stratum spinosum. Around 20% of skin cancers is this type. The type with the highest mortality rate is malignant melanoma. This is only around 2% of skin cancers, and it starts in melanocytes and continues to spread its cancer. So that was all for the integumentary system, as it's a pretty straightforward system in the body. Once again, my name is Arushi, and I thank you all for listening.